What's an unhealthy obsession people have? Love to hate. Being in a relationship no matter the cost. People are obsessed with youth and some people will do anything to maintain its appearance. 24-hour news cycles. Having to be first. It's okay if you beat me to the pump, or if you beat me to the grocery checkout line. It's okay if you get to the freeway exit before me, or pull in front of me on the highway. I'm patient, and it's a virtue. Edit, holy cow. Never had a comment blow up like this. Have to credit my father who taught me this. He was an airline captain for over 30 years who is a very patient man. Thanks Dad. Obsession with their social media image. An obsession with everything celebrities are doing. Pointless relationships. Settling for less just because you think you can't be alone is not healthy. Work/productivity. Everybody needs a break, not just every once in a while, but often. A obsession with each other's lives. Seriously, just let people live as long as they're not hurting anyone, just leave people the fuck alone. Their phones. It's one thing to keep yourself busy, it's another to never let yourself be bored. Being bored is important sometimes, it makes you think/helps clear your head. Phones make it ridiculously easy to never let yourself get bored, to the point where it ain't healthy. Other people's sex lives. Celebrity worship. They are just normal people guys, no different biologically than us. Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, videos that shorten our attention span. Arguing with strangers on social media. What's the most fucked up thing you've ever did/saw? I saw my little brother getting hit by a car and flying a few meters through the air when he was only 6 years old. Fortunately he didn't even break a bone, but damn, I'll never forget this. Found a dead body on the sidewalk in front of my building on my third day living in NYC. When I told my supervisor about it at work, hoping to process it with someone, she just kind of brushed it off like welcome to New York. The most fucked up thing I've seen was a guy who had just been in a motorcycle accident bleeding out on the side of the freeway. He was clenching onto the hand of the girl who was the driver of the car involved. She was crying hysterically. I saw his hand turn white in a matter of seconds. I remember it whenever I see someone on a bike. Worked in a gas station in 80s, some guy came in after midnight and bought a cigarette lighter. He walked outside and went over to one of the gas pumps and pumped gas all over himself. Set himself on fire after that. After I tripped, the emergency shut off for the pumps. Me and another customer ran outside. The customer tried to put the fire out on the guy with his jacket and I used a fire extinguisher on the other things that was on fire. Eventually we succeed, but the guy was seriously burned all over. This was the 80s, so most of his clothes was of synthetic fabric that had melted into his flesh. His face was kind of melted too. The ambulance came really quick and he was taken away. He didn't die, but I never saw him again. I talked to some cops a while later and they said that he was on probation and was protesting about his treatment and tried to commit suicide. Found my grandpa with a self-inflicted shotgun blast to the head. Still alive, unconscious. I was less traumatized by that than my family's shock reactions. Edit, he died on the way to the hospital. He was also dying from skin cancer, bone cancer, and bladder cancer. I completely understand why he did it, I just wish assisted suicide was more readily available to make it less traumatic. Fatal hit and run vehicle accident that happened in front of me. A car got struck by someone who ran a red light. The truck at fault basically slowed down a second and then drove away. I stopped to check on the people in the car. It was a couple of teens, the guy having substantial leg injuries and the girl was unconscious and losing a lot of blood. Like, her pants, seat, and floor carpet were becoming saturated with it. She basically stopped breathing and lost her pulse before the ambulance got there. The guy was crying and begging for me to help her, though there wasn't much I could do. Once she was loaded on the ambulance, the guy started pacing around, on his bad leg, and basically having a panic attack. The ambulance crew and some firefighters were mostly busy with the girl, so me and one other firefighter were trying to calm the guy down. He finally collapsed in pain and another ambulance arrived to get him taken care of. I remember getting in my car to drive home, turning the radio off, having a "what the fuck just happened" moment, then driving home in silence while trying to process it. Didn't get much sleep that night, obviously. I later learned that they never got her pulse back. She was either 15 or 16 years old. Don't remember exactly. I witnessed a bad car accident once. The car launched off of an overpass as I went under it. The car flipped several times. It was like something out of a movie. I was the first person on the scene. My wife called 911. It was not a pretty sight. The first thing I remember seeing was a severed arm beside the road. There wasn't much left of the person's body. I worked for a horse training ranch for a month when I was a kid. Me and the dude I worked with found a cow that had been dead for a while out in the field. It was bloated and gonna blow soon. We did not engage with the cow, we weren't prepared for a cleanup that day. When we came back prepared for cleaning the next day, it had ruptured and the smell was life-changing. It was spiritually bad. Since I was basically an unpaid intern, the paid guys told me to take a hike. 14-year-old me took a hike. I was a hard-working kid and they knew it, so let me off with that one. The photo evidence for a child, baby, murder case that they showed in court when I worked for the Department of Human Services. The parents wanted to retain custody of their older son, which is why they were involved with CPS. I was 22. There were just countless pages we had to look at while the expert witnesses explained what we were seeing. The images are burned into my brain forever and I'll never forget his name as long as I live. That poor baby. I tripped over a dead body in tall grass working an accident trying to find the missing passenger. It was 3 a.m. and raining. Saw a kid I knew get hit by a car, flip through the air, jump up and picked up one of his shoes and then collapse and got airlifted out. The rest of us were sitting on the corner eating hamburgers. Never saw him again. They said he was paralyzed. Edit, didn't expect this to get attention. I brought his banged up bike and glasses and shoes back to my house, but they never got picked up. My dad was on the volunteer fire department and managed the medevac landing and was first on scene because we only lived a few doors down. My story seems pretty lame after reading some of these stories. I saw a guy get his hand eaten by the Gatling gun on an A-10 aircraft in 1981. He had his hand/arm stuck in the gun for at least 6 hours while medial people were shooting him up with painkillers. They had no clue how to get him it without amputating his hand. They ended up taking the gun out of the aircraft. Understand, this is a big fucking gun, like the size of one of the old VW Bugs. They took the gun apart as much as they could and medevaced him out with this gearbox that had to weigh 200 pounds on his hand. I saw this guy about 6 months later, just before I transferred to another base. He had this giant bandage on his hand with 4 fingers and a thumb sticking out of it. Not sure how well everything worked, but he did have his fingers. Saw a guy run over by an 18-wheeler. Turned his head into red clay with a perfect tire track mark straight across. Grabbed my son the split second we were hit by a speeding car when he got off of his school bus. Had I not taken all impact, he'd be dead. He has a TBI from hitting the ground though. He lost adult teeth, he was 10, and road rash. I had to stumble and crawl to him breathless while a bus full of school children were screaming, having witnessed it. He's alive and thriving. This was December 2021. What would happen if everyone over 70 died tomorrow? Butterscotch stocks would plummet. Layoffs at retirement centers. Mass graves for millions of corpses that would be decaying in homes and streets with no capacity for coroners and cemeteries to take them fast enough. All the 69-year-olds would get really nervous. No Walmart greeters. The President of the United States and a lot of other world leaders would be dead. There would likely be a few significant power struggles that would cause some short-term unrest in the financial markets. There would instantly be a shortage of burial accessories and machinery to perform them. The cost of granite/marble would skyrocket and a general slowdown in the mining/quarry industry globally. There would likely have to be a mass grave situation in most smaller and impoverished countries and communities. A lot of pharmaceutical companies would go bankrupt. There would be a mass reduction in staff of most hospitals and elder care facilities. A vast majority of the world's wealth will be infused into government coffers due to death and inheritance taxes. A new generation of people would find themselves very wealthy all of a sudden. Sugar babies would likely riot. Among other things. US politics would be interesting. A large funeral, and a lot of governments falling apart. I'd be back to fucking haunt you. I would be sad because of my grandparents. Decent people. Japan would fucking collapse. 700+ million people dying would overload our capability to deal with the bodies. We'd have to fill most congressional seats. The people who love them would miss them. The year was 2023. Changes in cosmic radiation caused the human genome to mutate and flip a kill switch on anyone that had reached 70 Earth years old, popping their telomeres and unraveling their DNA like spaghetti. Panic and confusion set in, and within days, the horror of the stench drove people to madness. We burned bodies for days while the militaries of the world stood over their respective populations, demanding them to work around the clock. Some days I still feel the heat of those fires on a hot summer afternoon. Nothing could have prepared us for what came next. 365 days later, it happened again. All structure broke down and everyone just stopped caring. Humans broke out into tribes based on generations. Bodies rotted in the open, disease was rampant, and house pets had become feral hunters as ruthless as the roaming bands of former suburbanite marauders they once considered their masters. It's been 8 years since that day.